I'm going to get the disclaimer out of the way saying I've only seen 7 of the Friday the 13th movies, if you count Freddy vs. Jason. Getting that out of the way, I'm just going to say I love the Friday the 13th movies. But they're ungodly stupid. I mean, it exploits every slasher cliche, every horror cliche in general, and every 80s teen comedy film cliche. So, the Friday the 13th, if you want to sum down the Friday the 13th movies into one word, it's cliched. But if you want to sum it into a nicer word, I would choose fun, because they are fun movies. They're just really dumb. So I'm going to go through and give my opinions on the first 6 Friday the 13th films I've seen, not counting Freddy vs. Jason, because I just did that one. I'm going to give each film a rating out of 5. And 5 is in relativity to the Friday the 13th series. I mean, none of these films are good. Lock that in. None of these films are good. The 5 just says, means it's really good for a Friday the 13th movie, and 1 means it's even really bad for a Friday the 13th movie. So let's start with Friday the 13th Part 1. I did a video a while ago talking a little bit about this movie. It came out in 1980, 2 years after Halloween. It was a direct ripoff of Halloween to hopefully earn the same amount of money, at least. Basically, teenagers go to reset up Camp Crystal Lake, which is a summer camp where a really long time ago a boy drowned, and every time they try to reopen the camp, these strange deaths occur. So sure enough, as they start setting up the camp, more strange deaths appear, and that's about all you can say about Friday the 13th Part 1. I mean, I think the most noteworthy character is Kevin Bacon, only because it's Kevin Bacon. I mean, his character isn't even really that interesting. And that's the big problem I have with the Friday the 13th series, is that even though it's like 9 times out of 10 you won't care about the characters. So, I mean, I remember the leading lady, played by Amy Steele, and I remember Kevin Bacon, but none of the other characters are really that memorable or that interesting. They're all pretty ditzy and stupid. So, the cast of characters is, but the kills are definitely the highlight of this movie. Tom Savini's special effects work, the arrow coming through Kevin Bacon's neck, the axe to the face, the body attached to the door by the arrows. A lot of good kills, a lot of gore. Just about everything you can expect from a slasher movie from the 80s. There's gore and sex and drugs. I mean, so what would I rate this film? I give Friday the 13th Part 1 a 3 out of 5. It's not good, but it's entertaining. So let's go on to Friday the 13th Part 2. This one takes place 5 years after the events of the first movie. I forgot, there's going to be some spoilers in this video. I'm bringing that up now because I forgot to say that in Friday the 13th Part 1, Jason is not the killer. Lock that in. The killer in Friday the 13th Part 1 is Mrs. Voorhees, his mother. She's always killing all the people who try to reopen the camp because her son, Jason, is the one that drowned in the lake. But in Friday the 13th Part 2, you find out that Jason was actually alive the whole time, living in the woods, and he saw his mom being murdered. So now he's kind of doing the same thing his mom does, and now he's going to seek revenge on the camp counselors at a camp on the same lake, but it's not Camp Crystal Lake. So, again, the plot isn't really anything to write home about, but at least it gives an excuse to, at least it comes up with a kind of clever way to actually make Friday the 13th into a franchise. You know what's interesting? I heard that the Friday the 13th movies were originally supposed to do that anthology thing, like Halloween was going to do, where there's a new Halloween story every movie, but there's always going to be a new Friday the 13th movie story. But no, everyone wanted Jason, so I don't know. I guess it's history. there's a lot more characters that I remember in this film and that I care about. I mean, the two main characters, the guy and the girl, are really memorable and really fun. I remember the guy in the wheelchair. I remember the guy who's always cracking jokes, the redheaded guy. The kills are good in this movie, but they're not nearly as unique as they are in Part 1. Oh, I'm also going to say my favorite kills. In Part 1, my favorite kill is the arrow through Kevin Bacon. In Part 2, I'm going to have to say my favorite kill is the spear through the Lovemakers. Just straight through them, straight through the bed, through the floor. Great. Graphic, it's fun. Love that kind of stuff. Jason. First time you see Jason as the killer, he does not wear the hockey mask yet, though. He wears a bag over his head. And I seem to be the only one in the universe that thinks this, but I actually think the bag over Jason's head is a much creepier and much more menacing look than the hockey mask. But that's just my opinion. Jason's a moron. I'm just going to say that right now. Even his mother was a lot more cunning and smoother than Jason was. I mean, God, Jason is just so unsubtle and it's just clumsy. But it's Jason, and God knows everyone loves Jason. So, I'm going to say right now that out of the 6, 7 that I've seen, Friday the 13th Part 2 is in fact my favorite, so the scores are going to reflect that. I give Friday the 13th Part 2 a 4.5 out of 5. So, it's really good by Friday the 13th standards. Now we go to Friday the 13th Part 3. I don't like this one at all, really. Oh, man. My biggest complaint is that the next 2 movies actually don't take place on Friday the 13th. Because Friday the 13th Part 2 takes place 5 years after Friday the 13th Part 1. So it could be another Friday the 13th. But Friday the 13th Part 3 is said to take place a day after Part 2. And not only that, but it goes through a day and a night. So it would actually make it Sunday the 15th. So, it doesn't even take place on Friday the 13th, which is, I mean, it doesn't really have a negative effect on the story. I mean, I didn't even realize it, but it's kind of stupid having your week. That's like if Halloween took place on Christmas. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. So, why don't I like this one? The first part is, this movie, when it was originally released, was in terrifying third dimension. It was in 3D. You know, oh, 3D, so fancy. I mean, every other movie that comes out nowadays is in 3D, so. But, I mean, since this movie came out in the 80s, I mean, you can't really blame it, I guess, but God, the effect is bad. I mean, the DVD set I have comes with 3D glasses, and the 3D effect is really, really bad. I mean, it's just, it doesn't work right. I mean, and my biggest problem is that, I mean, having a 3D slasher movie, I mean, wouldn't you really take the time to use some good kills involving the 3D? But this one is always that stupid gimmick where it's like, oh, I'm gonna play with my yo-yo and flick it at the camera. It's like, whoa, it's right in my face. Here's an idea. Why don't you do something creative with the 3D? So the 3D is just total garbage. My biggest problem with Part 3 is probably that since Part 2 did a lot of good things with the franchise. I mean, it had some really good characters and some good actual suspense. And it wasn't quite as corny and campy as Part 1. This one is just, all the characters are dull and flat again. I mean, the characters are just beyond annoying and dull. And everything, there are so many motifs that are ripped off from other horror movies. I mean, there's like, you see Jason lurking and the camera is just positioned over his shoulder. That's from Halloween. I'm pretty sure there's a shower scene, and we all know what that's from. And there's actually, the finale of this movie rips off Friday the 13th Part 1. And one of the kills rips off the arrow through Kevin Bacon, only it's like a machete or something through a girl. It's like, when you're ripping off your own first movie, you gotta know you're doing something wrong.